bustling city, hidden from the unaware eyes of its inhabitants. A network of dark and winding tunnels snaked through the bowels of the urban sprawl. This underground system was a place where light feared to penetrate, and the echoes of the surface world were swallowed by the suffocating silence. Even in these underground chambers filled with winding tunnels and darkness, brave people work tirelessly for the greater good. Among these dedicated souls was a young man named Jacob. Fresh out of college, he had been assigned to join the ranks of the city's sanitation department. Armed with a sturdy suit, a headlamp, and a heart full of determination, he ventured into the subterranean labyrinth, eager to prove himself. Jacob's first days in the sewers were marked by a monotonous routine. He diligently cleared blockages, repaired pipes, and waded through murky water, all while feeling the oppressive weight of the gloom overhead. Jacob would continue to work hard and do his daily tasks. But as the days wore on, strange occurrences began to unsettle him. Whispers carried on the stale air, echoing faintly through the tunnels. Shadows danced just beyond the reach of his flickering headlamp, their movements both elusive and unnerving. Jacob and his colleague Tom were working deep within the belly of the city. Today was quite easy, and the two of them began to get bored, so they both decided to play a game that helped them pass the time whilst working. This game was called STR, or Spot the Rat, which was its name in full. The rules of the game were very simple. Every time either one of them saw a rat, the first person to say STR out loud won, and their prize was to punch the loser in their right arm. As you could imagine, working in the sewer, one would come across rats quite often, so Jacob's arm was quite sore, as Tom had been on a roll that day and had punched him 13 times already. Tom and Jacob had been goofing off whilst playing STR, and they hadn't realized that they had traversed through tunnels and doors they had never been through before. Their boss had repeatedly told them to only stick to the locations they were shown, as these sewers stretched across the whole city, and its vast networks stretched across miles, possibly hundreds. They were also warned of reports of strange occurrences in the further depths of the sewers. The last bit was more of a hazing ritual that the staff always told the newbies to scare them. But the reports had been genuinely made. But regardless, Jacob and Tom had indeed wandered off trail. Tom was trying to tell Jacob about his late shift yesterday, and that he had heard what sounded a little bit like laughter. Jacob was panicking and not even listening to his teammate's story. But before he could vocalize his unease at their current situation, he noticed a very unusual door. Compared to everything else he had seen down in the sewers, this door stood out like nothing he had noticed previously. The door had a strange symbol engraved into it that sort of resembled a face with snakes out of the side of it, but it was quite difficult to make out. Tom too was also uneasy about their current predicament, but he wanted to seem brave, so he suggested that they open the door, have a quick look inside, and then clock off from work for the night. Jacob was profusely sweating at this point, but reluctantly agreed. Oblivious to the danger that lay ahead, they pushed open the heavy door and stepped into a place that seemed frozen in time. The moment they both stepped in, they immediately felt dizzy, and after a short moment, they were both fine again. Upon looking around the room, it was a macabre sight to behold. Rusty pipes lined the walls, dripping with wet, black, viscous liquid that pooled on the floor. A damp, suffocating atmosphere hung heavy in the air, tinged with a scent of decay. Cryptic writing was sprawled all over the walls, showing disturbing imagery that depicted entities slaughtering people and what possibly looked like people being sacrificed. Not even through imagination could one perceive the pain depicted in the imagery. This whole situation was beginning to be too much for Jacob. At this point, his teeth were chattering away so loudly that Tom asked him what that sound was. The flickering of their headlamps casted eerie shadows that danced upon the walls, distorting the strange symbols scrawled across them. Just as Jacob was about to turn and back out, they both jumped, as they could hear talking coming from further down. They took slow steps forwards, and the voices grew louder. They kept walking forward for what felt like hours to them, but in fact it had only been about 5 minutes. They were met with another door. This one had an engraving again like the previous one, but this one looked like a face, but this time with snakes coming out of its mouth. The voices were loud, but what they were saying didn't make any sense at all. The door was a tiny bit open, and curiously, Jacob decided to push it open a little bit, his eyes widening at what was in front of him. He could see people inside. They were screaming and talking in a language that neither Tom nor Jacob could understand. Tom was standing still, peeping at the people inside the room. Tom commenting on the strange black robes these people were wearing. But then Jacob started to panic and started tapping Tom on the shoulder. And then he started to shake him soon afterwards. But Tom wasn't paying attention to any of it. In fact, Tom was completely fixated. Now the people inside started screaming even louder and chanting. The chanting started to get faster and faster. They were talking so fast that it was almost mesmerizing to look at. Then, like clockwork, their hand movements changed, and they started gesturing at Tom to join, beckoning him to come to them whilst this black, fatty liquid was oozing from their mouths. Their hands were also covered in this unclean sludge. Tom started walking towards them with the facial expression of complete ecstasy, whilst Jacob was trying to hold his friend back, but to no avail. Jacob tried with all of his might to try and keep Tom from walking back to them, but it wasn't working. And then suddenly, like a stroke of genius, Jacob remembered how sore Tom's arm was due to their earlier game of Spot the Rat. At that moment, Jacob mustered all of the strength he had left, balled up his fist, and punched Tom in the same sore spot he had aimed for all of that day. And then suddenly, Tom snapped out of his infatuation immediately. Opening his eyes, Tom could see Jacob's horrified expression in the corner of his eyes. Tom was confused, so he looked forward and he could see a person leaning over him. That person was laughing, and black sludge was pouring from their gaping mouth into Tom's. Jacob pulled aggressively on Tom's arm, so much so that he was able to pull him back onto his feet again, pushing off that crazed person off of Tom at the same time. The pair saw their opportunity and they started running towards the door. They kept running and running for what felt like an hour. Eventually, they made it back to the first creepy door they came in through. And for the first time, the two of them had hope again. In a cruel twist of fate, instantly Jacob fell to his knees and he started throwing up, as if the shock of it all had almost made him pass out. As Jacob was throwing up, Tom started laughing, and Jacob called Tom an asshole for laughing at him. Jacob wiped the last bit of vomit from his lips, and still Tom was laughing. But at the same time, he sounded like he was emotional, or maybe even crying. Jacob looked up and asked his friend if he was genuinely laughing so much that he had brought himself to tears. As Jacob got back onto his feet, his hand on his body's shoulder, Tom slowly turned around, revealing a face full of tears, but a smile from ear to ear, with black jelly-like liquid pouring out of his mouth. Jacob had the door open, and even though his friend was clearly not well, he still didn't want to leave him behind. Jacob still tried to pull Tom with him, but maybe with his last shred of humanity, or just a random occurrence of rage, Tom shoved Jacob out of the door. Jacob had the door open, and even though his friend was clearly not well, he still didn't want to leave him behind. Jacob still tried to pull Tom with him, but maybe with his last shred of humanity, or just a random occurrence of rage, Tom shoved Jacob through the door that Jacob was holding open for them both. The door was slightly ajar, and Jacob could see the shadow of his friend and his appearance start to warp and change into a grotesque thing, steadily moving away from humanity. Tom's jaw unhinging and his mouth widening, Jacob picked himself up and started running towards the exit of the sewers. He wasn't exactly sure that this was the correct direction, but Jacob just kept running. The sound of laughter was now coming from all directions. Upon hearing this, Jacob started to run towards the light of the exit in the distance. Jacob continued running with everything he had, and eventually he made it outside the sewer exit and to his freedom. Jacob burst into tears and sobbed until his face started to ache.